Just when things get bad, they get better. That was the Pacers of last year. They beat the Celtics in overtime after trying to blow it. Awesome nights from Ben Mathurin and Pascal Siakam. And of course, so much to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, what a game. What a game that we have to break down. Pacers beat the defending champs again. The third time in the last two regular seasons they've toppled Boston, which is quite the feat given how good that Celtics team can be at their absolute best. Pacers really ran them out of the gym for 40 minutes, believe it or not, in an overtime game. The game did, in fact, end up going to overtime. It didn't look as pretty as it suggested because the Pacers were absolutely rolling for so much of this game. They looked fantastic. Ben Mathurin and Pascal Siakam were terrific. We'll break down their play. We'll break down the last 8 minutes and the overtime. That was so huge for the Pacers. Stuff that went well. Their pace. There it was. That was it. Lots of good stuff. And their not so good clutch stuff from this season. We must start with the studs who got this done. I mean, the Pacers needed this one in the worst way, first of all, because I predicted. You can go back and listen to the schedule preview. I predicted they'd be 2-3, and they are. The way they got there, very unpretty. That's not saying this was a good start to the season, but it's not that crazy given their schedule. They needed this win in the worst way after two close losses where they kind of tripped all over themselves, and they got it. And Pascal Siakam and Ben Mathurin were the biggest, by far, I would say, reasons why this got done. We'll start with Siakam, who I said yesterday, 2 days ago, had been their best player all season. That continued tonight in the most needed time possible. Look, I could read you stats, and I will, and I can talk to you about things that happen, and I will, but he was just stabilizing in this game. 37 minutes and 40 seconds of play for Siakam. When he was out there, it just felt better for the Pacers in this game. Obi Toppin had to play a lot of five, and keep this in mind through a lot of this podcast. Myles Turner didn't play with an ankle injury, and Andrew Nembhard barely played with a knee injury, which we found out after the game. So Siakam's role was like toggling between like 4 and 4.5. Sometimes he's been defended by Horford, and sometimes he's defending Horford. But a lot of the times, Siakam had the very hard task of defending Jaylen Brown, which he did an awesome job on. He was amazing at Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown finishes with 11 for 30, I believe, from the field. My tabs are loading really weird. Yeah, 11 for 30 from the field with 25 points. Siakam defended him awesome. Tatum was at least efficient for Boston, but Siakam defended him very well. Right? That mattered a great deal in breaking up what Boston can do, because when those two get rolling, right, as good as Tatum was with 37 points on 25 shots, those two players I just named were combined 6 of 29 from three. Like, that's where the Celtics can get you. If they get rolling from deep, you're just screwed. The Pacers never let that happen. In fact, I said yesterday, when previewing this game with John, I said the Pacers defense will be the most important thing of this game. And 124 is a lot of points for Boston in regulation, but I said 120 was kind of this mark. Pacers scored enough to prove me wrong, but they actually defended better than they have in a lot of other games this season. And Siakam was a huge part of that. He shut down or at least deterred the Stars in a major way that covered up a lot of other stuff. You know, Derek White was unbelievable. He couldn't miss, but no one else really rose to the occasion. It felt like Peyton Pritchard did if you watched the game, but even he was 4 for 11 from deep. So that's like the headline of Siakam's good game was the defense. Well, it isn't the headline. We'll get to the headline in a second, but I think that's the most important thing he did in this game. And on top of that, he had 29 and 11 with 5 assists. Like, he was just ridiculous. 6 threes for Siakam, tied his career high with that. 29 points, obviously a major deal. 5 offensive rebounds, so it's kind of just finding ways to poach and be impactful in the paint and finish plays. Didn't turn it over that much. Just a really awesome offensive game. They could turn to him when they needed to. The Celtics had very few answers for him with their own matchups. Just an awesome wire-to-wire game from Siakam, who saved them also. I mean, the Pacers were winning for a ton of this game, right? Basically the whole time. Obviously, it went to overtime. The Pacers trailed very early, but I like won. In overtime, the Celtics took a lead with 40 seconds left to go up by 2 at 132-130. That was their biggest lead of the game. And 3 seconds later, Pascal Siakam scored and tied the game. And then they got to stop. And we'll talk about overtime and late game stuff for the Pacers in a minute. But after the stop, Siakam hit the biggest shot of the game, one of his biggest shots with the Pacers. I can't make a list very quickly, but overtime, gets a three, gets just a tiny bit of space from his defender, and the way he was shooting all night, willing to let the three fly confidently and just drilled it. Huge shot. Broke the flow of the game for him to hit those two shots in the final minute to go with the stuff he'd been doing defensively. It was as big as it gets for him to not only play very well, to have clutch moments, to carry the Pacers to a win that they desperately needed after their last two games. They needed everything Pascal Siakam gave him in this game, and he gave him everything. Defended well, two-way play, passing, scoring, rebounding. Incredibly good Pascal Siakam game. And yet, he was not the Pacers' leading scorer. Bennedict Mathurin, hello. My Lord, after the season he's had with insane peaks and valleys, they needed him to peak today, and he did. And it'll make you wonder what the series could have looked like if he was healthy last year. Obviously, if he could do this every game, he'd be, thought of as a different player. I've never scored so much of the game. He would catch and drive. And here's what stood out. The same thing that stood out to me in Detroit and at times in the preseason, the stuff that's going to matter for Mathurin to play. Early in this game, he had two plays that were rough. Sam Hauser beat him on a cut, and Derek White got right by him, right? And he did not sulk at all. His very next possession after both of those was a good offensive play with like a whip out killer pass from the paint or like good finish or a foul draw. And I don't mean to highlight negative plays first because he was incredible tonight. He, after that, was consistently really good on both ends all night. He defended very well, which did not happen in Orlando or against Philly, per his own admission even in some of those cases. Rick Carlisle talked about that long film session they had on 107.5 The Fan. He defended very well in this game, was engaged on that end, and seeing shots go in certainly helps with that. But 11 free throw attempts. No one on Boston could guard him. No one could stay in front of him or keep him out of where he wanted to go in the lane, which is what made him so good as a rookie. 11 free throw attempts. That was almost half of the Pacers' total attempts. He's a very good rebounding guard. He always has been. I talked about that on the What the Pacers Missed Without Mathurin podcast. 11 rebounds. Huge. The Pacers won the rebounding battle. They really needed to do that in this game, and they did. Nembhard was out. They needed Mathurin to defend and score and shoot a little. And from three, guess what? 2 for 5, 40%. 4 assists, 4 turnovers. He was not happy about that after the game. That was part of his move on to the next play mentality. But 4 assists is a good night for him. And again, the stuff that stood out early was bouncing back from not so good plays and the passing. When he has the reads going, when he's engaged like that on both ends, that is when he is awesome. And boy, oh boy, was he awesome in this game. Ben Mathurin was sensational at times, a lot of times, the Pacers' best or most important player on the floor because of something he was doing either defensively or as a scorer or as a ball handler. And he had several very, very crucial offensive rebounds or tip outs in a way that the Pacers really needed when their offense would bog down. He was terrific. Just an awesome Ben Mathurin game. And this will lead to discussions, as they kind of should sometimes, about what his role is and what he can do every night. Because if he could do this every game, he should be playing way more than this, but he doesn't do this every game. And I don't want to get into that discussion now. I would like to get into that probably on tomorrow's podcast. But this was like one of those, like, wow, both games they've won, he's really played like this, where he just takes over to an extent that just makes you wonder, what the perfect role way to figure out what he can be is. I mean, that was sensational. He was just a wrecking force. And it's not isolations when he does it right away, and he did it right away, and he made the passes. It was just as good as it gets from Ben Mathurin. They won his minutes by 3 in a 3-point win. That speaks to everything, and especially with a starter out to step up in that way was so huge, paired well with Haliburton after starting the second half. I mean, I could go on and on. So Siakam and Mathurin together, 59 points, 22 rebounds, and 9 assists. Awesome. Both shot over 50%. Both made their threes at a high level. Both got to the foul line. Only Mathurin made them, but both got to the foul line. That is what the Pacers needed. They had other good performances, if not great performances, from several other guys. But finally, I think someone will say Tatum, and they're allowed to do that. Tatum really got going late in this game, especially in the fourth quarter. And again, 37 points on 25 shots. Sure, maybe Tatum was the best player in this game. In fact, I bet some will say that, similar to Cade on opening night. But a lot of Tatum's work came really late. And that is why I bring this all up to say, finally, Tatum had 12 points in the fourth quarter. Almost a third of his points came in the fourth quarter. Prior to that point, Siakam and Mathurin were better than him. And finally in this game, and you might be able to argue this for the and the Pacers had the best player on the floor, and maybe two. And that is how they needed to play to beat the Celtics. The Celtics, the best team in the NBA. And they did it because those two players were at their absolute best. Mathurin could not be stopped and defended and passed and made quick decisions. Siakam made threes at a level he typically doesn't. He defended his butt off. He was clutch. Awesome win for the Pacers. Those two guys had the most to do with that. We have so much more to get to. Crunch time woes. Who else played well? What else made this possible? What this means for the Pacers season, and so much more to get to on today's Locked On Pacers. Before we talk about any of that, though, we need to talk about the great folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the ongoing NFL season with FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers on FanDuel can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's a nice deal. $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet on FanDuel. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place those live bets on the NFL or NBA or whatever. And it's all in one place, because it happens to all of us. It might happen to you. When you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you know what's coming. You feel good about it. You can go check out the latest stats or go view live play-by-play. So much more. So you can be as informed as possible when you go make your bets. All on the same page. And it's all on FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is on FanDuel.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, two options. One, Locked On Celtics. To hear John talk about this perspective, you heard him here yesterday, talking about how good the Celtics have been to start the season. Dethroned by the mighty Pacers. Not top of the East anymore, those Boston Celtics. The Cavs hold that honor. So Locked On Celtics could be your second listen. Or if you're an Indy person, boy, oh boy, do Locked On Colts have a lot to talk about. Woo! A benching at quarterback for a 500 team. That is interesting. I will save my own opinions, but I will let Zach and Jake tell you more over on Locked On Colts. Let's keep it going here. If I just talked about Siakam and Mathurin, I'd be doing a disservice to several other terrific contributors for the Pacers in their win over the Celtics. And I would just like to start by talking about a guy whose stats mean almost nothing to me anymore when he plays. That's Ben Sheppard. Every game at some point, I think I've just looked down or written my notes or something and just been like, Ben Sheppard's playing really well. And I look and he has like a point and like 2 rebounds and 1 assist or something. And the Pacers are winning his match. It's just like he just is a winning type of player. Ben Sheppard, the same stuff he was good at last year that made him valuable is making him valuable this year. He does not mess up very much, right? He does not commit a bunch of turnovers. He's very rarely in the wrong spot. That dude's effort is top-notch every single possession. But he's adding skills, right, in a way that in the preseason didn't look particularly good, but have made him clearly a better player right now for the Pacers, right? He is a little more mobile, can do a little bit more from a driving perspective. Don't know what just happened to the display for those of you on YouTube. Sorry about that. As my face just appeared. Like he finished 2 nice layups in this game, driving from the left side of the paint. He finishes with 7 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, right? No one's going to go, oh, wow, what a stat line. What a ridiculous performance from Ben Sheppard. But he did all that while playing awesome defense against the reigning champs, against the team that he started against last year in the postseason, and pulled in a vital, as crucial as it gets, rebound for the Pacers with 30 seconds to go. When the game was still hanging in the balance, the Pacers force a key miss. The ball falls to him. He grabs it, and then it's called a jump ball. They give Peyton Pritchard some credit for grabbing it too, even though Sheppard had it. Rick Carlisle, very unhappy, wanted a foul call. But it's a jump of Ben Sheppard versus the much shorter Peyton Pritchard. Huge job by Ben Sheppard to win said tip. That mattered a great deal for the Pacers late in this game, as well as they were trying to put things away. That led to the Siakam 3 that obviously became the game winner. So major props to Ben Sheppard for the way he played in this game and the way he continues to just play for the Pacers. He's been very solid for a long time. and was huge in this game. And of course, rebounds in the clutch always look really dramatic. But if you have 7.6 rebounds, 2 assists, I said his stat line wrong earlier. I was having a computer glitch going on when you saw my weird screen come up. That's a huge game worth celebrating. Ben Sheppard was massive for the Pacers in this one. Also massive for the Pacers in this one. Second game in a row. I was really bummed we didn't get to spend more time on him after a not so good Pacers result on Monday. Isaiah Jackson, again, was very good. He was the backup on Monday in Orlando and played very well, despite not being particularly efficient. This game, he was efficient and was still awesome. He started with Myles turnaround. And let me tell you, when Isaiah Jackson is your only available center, because Wiseman and Turner are gone, I could have told you right then he was going to foul out. It's the Celtics. He's going to be switched on to tough situations. He's just going to foul out. And he did. And he was awesome despite that. That says a lot about what he overcame. 10 points on 5 shots. So got to the foul line and made his free throws, by the way, which in this game mattered a great deal. Pacers had been losing games where they were missing free throws. Tonight, they were, outside of Pascal Siakam, hitting 20 for 24. They needed him and they got him. 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Isaiah Jackson's defense this season has been excellent. His offense, as he's being efficient as he usually is, has been very good as well. They needed him to be really great for a very long time in this game. 25 minutes is much over what he's accustomed to or used to, especially against the best offense of maybe all time by offensive rating. And Isaiah Jackson was once again very good. So 2 role guys who will not get a ton of credit for the way the Pacers played in this one, and Jackson and Sheppard both deserve a lot of praise for the way they played. Let's get to Tyrese Haliburton, because statistically, efficiency, not good. 17 points on 19 shots. He will not be happy about that. 2 for 10 from 3. You know what I'm going to say. 5 for 7 on 2s. It's always one or the other this year. He has yet to have a game where he is feeling it from both ranges. He believes he will get through it at any time when we were talking to him after the game. But despite that not being an efficient night, 6 boards for Tyrese Haliburton, 12 assists with just 1 turnover and 2 steals. They played very well in his minutes on the floor. The Celtics still respected what he could do, and he was moving it very well, which ties into what I thought was maybe the most noteworthy takeaway that everybody was tweeting and talking about, right? I felt this way in Orlando too, and Haliburton had a lot of assists in that game. But you can tell the Pacers are getting their zip back, right? I wrote a story in Forbes about their pace and their lack thereof, really, in the early season games. And a lot of it was like their defensive possessions are really slow, which makes it hard for them to run. And their offensive time of possession was, offensive time per possession last year was first in the NBA, and it's been 9th this year. So really, if you wanted to dissect what the Pacers' pace was, a lot of it was their defensive possessions being long, a rebounding problem, and some of it was their offensive possessions just a little shorter in comparison to the rest of the league than last year. And that kind of ties in with like, hey, Siakam and Nembhard are fine initiators, but they do it slower than Haliburton for sure, and they're not as good as him at it. Haliburton was the initiator today. 12 assists, obviously, is a major deal. And lo and behold, the Pacers' pace was by far their fastest of the season. Their fastest game before this was Orlando, and then Detroit before that. They were 7 possessions over that in this game per 100. Like, they were moving and grooving, and that is what the Pacers need to look like. That pace was needed. You can read more on that and quotes from Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, Rick Carlisle, and Tyrese Haliburton in Forbes. But I thought that it was noteworthy, not only that Haliburton played well, right, had a double-double again, and was sniffing a triple-double, despite being inefficient, was very good, but also what that meant for the team's total pace and process. So if you made me summarize this one with everything I've said so far, style looked good, had the best 2 players, needed it, made their free throws, correcting all sorts of stuff that's been a problem for them this season. Well, unfortunately, one of their biggest problems, clutch play, was a huge problem again. We'll get to that in a second. Other guys who deserve shout-outs. Aaron Nesmith fouled out. 12, 8, and 3 with only 1 turnover on 5 for 9 shooting. Hit half his threes. Very good. They need him against a team with a bunch of wings, and he stepped up. Andrew Nembhard was +3 and made his only shot when on the floor with his knee issues, and they won by 3. So didn't have anything worth talking about, but played a fine game. Obi Toppin and TJ McConnell were good off the bench. Toppin's 3rd game in a row with pretty significant scoring. He had 18 in this one, as well as 7 rebounds and 3 assists. And McConnell back with a heavy rotation dose after not playing much in Orlando with his usual 10 and 3, and was very inspired, as he usually was. Everybody who played contributed in a way that the Pacers really needed. Even Jarris Walker provided some size defensively, although his turnovers were an issue in this game. Pacers needed everyone to be good. They needed to have the best player on the floor somehow. They needed to play like the Pacers because that style has stressed out the Celtics. And guess what? They did all of it. And they hit threes, almost 40% of them. And they hit free throws. And they won the rebounding battle. Basically, everything but turnovers. Will be happy for the Pacers who get a big win. They're 2-3. They have a road trip coming up that's manageable. In fact, their next 4 or 5 games are manageable. Perhaps they could be 500 or over that 5 games from now at 10 games in. But one bugaboo got them. This is a happy podcast because they won. But was this almost a very, 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 very grumpy Pacers team after the game. Man, did they almost blow it. We have so much to get to talking about their clutch time play and how they overcame it to close out today's Locked On Pacers. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Or second listen, Locked On Blazers. That's so random, but they got their first win tonight. They beat the Clippers, who've been actually playing pretty well. That's remarkable. Good for the Blazers. Mike Richmond is a killer podcast host. You can hear him over at Locked On Blazers. 112-91. That was the score of this basketball game in favor of the Pacers with 8 minutes and 40 seconds to go. Both terrific numbers for the Pacers, by the way. 112, and let's call this for rounding. 40 minutes of play, right? 3 quarters is 36 minutes. And they got basically 4 minutes, really closer to 3, but whatever. For the first 40 minutes of this game, Pacers scoring a lot and defending pretty well. All they got to do, let's be clear about this. If they stink up the last 8.5 minutes so much that the Celtics outscore them by 2 points per minute in that stretch, they would still win in regulation. They did not win in regulation, right? You could even go farther if you wanted. I don't know. I chose 21 because it was their only 20-point lead in the fourth quarter. I think the most jarring, you should have won this stat would be 115-96, a 19-point lead with 6:30 to go. They were 30 seconds away from being able to give up a 3 points a minute deficit to the Celtics and still win. And this game still was not won in regulation by the Pacers. Jaylen Brown was scoring. Peyton Pritchard was scoring. All of a sudden, it's an 11-point game with 4:18 to go, and the Pacers are missing. They got a huge timely 3 from Nesmith, but misses. Turnovers just everywhere. They were looking rough. And yet, they still should easily have won this game. Up 10 with 3.5 minutes to go. Finally, the Celtics get it to 9 with 2:24 to go, then 7 with 1.5 to go. That still should be a win. Up 7 with the ball with 90 seconds to go. Turnover from Obi Toppin. And then the Celtics get 2 points, and then a turnover from Ben Mathurin. And then the Celtics get 2 more points, and then Ben Sheppard misses a layup. But that possession actually went well. And they get an offensive rebound, and then Haliburton misses a 3. It just was a catastrophe. And then Jason Tatum hits 2 free throws, and it's a 1-point game. All of a sudden, that 10-point lead with, 2 minutes to go is gone. They're up 1. Thankfully, Tyrese Haliburton, huge clutch shot with 21 seconds to go, a turnaround in the lane to put him up 3. Because instead of fouling up 3, there were 14 seconds left. I get waiting, but they should have fouled. Jason Tatum hits a 3 to tie it. They had a 21-point lead evaporate in the fourth quarter. 19 points in about half a quarter of play. Gone. That is awful. That is unacceptably bad. And that was going to be what this podcast would have been all about. 38-24 fourth quarter. Pacers had 6 turnovers in the fourth quarter, in just the fourth quarter. They were 3 for 8 from the field and 7 for 22. 3 for 8 from 3, 7 for 22 from the field, which means they were 4 for 14 on 2s. Not good shot selection. 2 rushed. They got lucky to make some of those 3s. Turnovers were rough. And they got 6 offensive rebounds, which was huge also, but that was all terrible. And that's on top of bad defense, where Jaylen Brown got going a little bit, Tatum got going a lot of bit and was drawing fouls. Derek White didn't miss a shot in the fourth quarter. It was all a disaster. Terrible defense, untimely turnovers. It just felt like in fact, it didn't even feel like this. They kind of alluded to this after the game. Their pace was awesome throughout the game. They were playing fast, making the Celtics react. This is Pacers basketball. Boom, boom, boom. This is great. They need that style to continue on this coming 2-game road trip. They got away from it. They tried to kind of deflate the ball and slow it down and let the clock be a defender. And they kind of were able to, but not enough. And that was just a pathetically bad 8 minutes of play. Pathetically bad to get outscored by 21 in basically 8 minutes. And then they came out in overtime and looked pretty good, right? Haliburton hit a 3 right away, and then Siakam hit an important free throw, and Mathurin was doing stuff, and Siakam did obviously the clutch stuff late that we already talked about. They were still losing in the overtime at one point when Derek White scored, but they looked good in overtime, right? Tatum couldn't score. They defended him pretty well. They did not turn it over a single time in the overtime. They were 2 for 3 on 2-point shots. They're rebounding. They just went back to playing Pacers basketball. And so a couple things, this has been a problem all season for them. Crunch time, right? Detroit, they were up enough that they should have sealed it, and then it got closer and closer and closer until Haliburton hit the big three. They were up 5 late against Philly and blew that game. Man, they needed that one in retrospect. The Orlando game was tied in the final minute. And then this one, if they had lost this one, which up how much they were in the fourth quarter, this would have been a very hard podcast to do. They got it done. But their clutch play is just, what stands out about it is beyond that they aren't a great defensive team, so getting stops is a little hard. They go away from their style, and some of that is so natural. I get wanting to slow the game down. Maybe you don't have to do that. You can still play fast and zippy. But what a lot of teams do to make that happen, which is smart, to be clear, is they pound the ball a lot. They're dribbling. They're more stationary. And that's mostly because the worst thing that can happen in a close clutch game is a turnover. That's the worst thing that can happen, especially a live ball turnover. So if you ISO or you don't move it as much and you get deep in the shot clock, you at least get a shot up or make it or score whatever you may do. That's why the Pacers thing that killed them in this game was not even necessarily their awful defense. 6 turnovers in the fourth quarter. That's terrible. That can't happen. And I think that, to me, has been their biggest dooming thing in these close games this season. Has not been execution on offense or defense. It has been turnovers. Think about the Philly game in the final minute. 3. If any one of those goes either way, they could be 3-2 right now. 6 turnovers in the fourth quarter of this game. A few against Orlando. That was terrible. They got themselves out of it, and they earned a win. They played they, in a 53-minute game, were better than the Celtics for 45 minutes at least. They deserved to win. But that 8-minute stretch was god-awful and reflective of how terrible they've been in the clutch of the season. Maybe it's good that they got a wake-up call and they got a win, and it's clear that they know why, but that was really rough for the Pacers, who, outside of that, had a pretty good night. And that should be the takeaway. For a team that has been kind of floundering and weird, they now, for 2 straight games, have looked like themselves. 2.5, really. I thought the second half against Philly, they started up the tempo, but they looked like themselves against Minnesota, and Ben Carroll went crazy. They looked like themselves against Boston, and they won. They are getting more from Haliburton. Siakam has looked good every night. I don't know that they're playing awesome or playing good enough to be confident that they are rounding into form or anything like that. But these last 2 games have looked like the Pacers. They've shown some progress with some young players like Mathurin having an awesome game, like Sheppard continuing to be great. Isaiah Jackson's been wonderful, and they're on a winning path right now. Pelicans are really banged up. We'll talk more about them tomorrow. The Mavs are good, but the Pacers swept them last year, right? There is a chance and then Charlotte's after that and Orlando at home, winnable but tough games. Having momentum and figuring out what your problems are, important. Looking like yourself and the best version of yourself, important. I don't want to get ahead of myself from one game. You guys know how I am, especially early in the season. I want a big sample, but they not only did they win, which matters a great deal for a team that was 1-3, but they look like themselves. I think that's extremely important for the Pacers as they trudge on to this next stretch. And we'll talk about it all right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Incredible Mathurin game, incredible Siakam game. Looking forward to seeing how all these guys followed up. And they play New Orleans Friday. And don't forget what happened last time the Pacers were in New Orleans, where the Pelicans had that first quarter where they scored on every single possession. Yes, that really happened. If you don't remember, you should look it up. You can find me on Twitter at Tony R. East and this podcast there at Locked On Pacers. Don't forget, we have a newsletter now. It's free. And every day in your inbox, you will get the latest podcast with a write-up about what's in it. You will get the last 3 podcasts at the bottom with a little blurb, and also writing from Katie Heindel and Mike Shearer and fantasy basketball analysis and lots more from Locked On. It's really awesome. Everybody who I've asked about it who subscribed really likes it. I, of course, am subscribed because I want to see what it looks like. It's great. I really recommend it if you want to see what's in every episode with more descriptions and writing for me. So check that out. Back tomorrow talking Pels. Probably talking some Mathurin and some other key Pacers topics early in the season. Till then, everybody have a wonderful day.